Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business. Hey, it's Michael Zapersky, and today I'm very excited to have Willard Barth joining us. Willard, welcome.
Oh, thank you, Michael. It's great to be here.
So, Willard, for those who aren't familiar with you and your work, explain for us what you do.
Sure. Well, a combination of things. I actually just last year released a new book called The Anatomy of Transformation, which documents a process that I've used for 30 years in my own life and that I've also used with my clients to help them go from where they are to where they want to be. I am a business consultant. I've been doing that now professionally for 20 years. And I also co-founded a coaching academy. We launched it about 2 years ago, where we help teach people how to make that transformation from whether it's the corporate world or a regular job into a profession where you would be a coach or a consultant.
Right. So talk to me a little bit more about where this came from, because you used the word transformation a couple of times. What were you doing before you got into this line of work?
A lot of insanity, actually. Now, my journey started out, I lost my leg when I was 8 years old to bone cancer. And it put me on a very diverse path. In one aspect, it made me a mega achiever. So whatever people told me that I couldn't do, I had to go out and prove them wrong. So I was one of the first licensed amputee motorcyclists in Pennsylvania. I started making my living as a musician at 15 years old, lettered in junior high school wrestling, lettered in high school football, and had my first business by the time I was 19 years old. So to the external world, it looked like I was a great example of how somebody deals with overcoming these things. But inside, I was really a basket case. I had a lot of questions, not much self-esteem, a lot of anger. So at the age of 13, I ended up finding the wonderful world of alcohol and drugs. And the same way that I overachieved in other areas of my life, I took that to the limit also. So because of the abuse going down that pathway, again, 19 years old, I had my first business. 20 years old, I was facing 5 to 8 years in jail. And I ended up doing a total of 12 months between jails, halfway houses, and rehabs. So when I talk about transformation and I talk about the tools that I use to transform my own life and now that I share with other people, it really was about taking my life where I was mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, and financially destroyed based on the actions that I took and the decisions I made when I was younger, and turning it around to being a life that is beyond what I ever could have dreamed was possible. So the transformation for me is more than just a buzzword. It really is having gone from waking up in the morning, looking in a mirror and not being able to stand seeing what was looking back at me, to loving who I am, loving what I do, and really helping other people transform their lives and their businesses.
One thing that stood out to me as I was reading your website, you clearly state on your site that you've been sober for 28 years, maybe, and counting now. That's a very personal thing to share. So many people in the world of business kind of want to hide behind their vulnerabilities, their mistakes, their challenges. You're putting that front and center. Why?
I actually did stop talking about it for several years. And what I found was it actually negatively impacted what I was doing, because we all have to look at what differentiates us from the competition. What is it about ourselves and our journey that allows somebody who's looking to work with us to go, you know what, this person is not just talking the talk, but they've walked the walk. And it was a part of, in 2009, I had released this video series that was called Self-Awareness 101. And I really got a lot of inquiries from that video series asking more about my past, because they were like, okay, you know what you're talking about, but where did you learn these things? And I went back to starting sharing that part of my journey and some of the other things. And I really learned that transparency and authenticity at a level that many people are uncomfortable with is really one of my greatest assets, because people don't look at me as being somebody who's just wearing the suit and using a bunch of fancy lingo. They recognize that I've actually walked this journey, and the things I'm sharing with them is not theory. It's the actual steps that I use to overcome these things in my life.
Yeah, I think this is a really important conversation, both from the personal perspective, but also from a business perspective. So many people these days, again, have this fear, but I think if they're very honest with themselves, they deep down inside actually recognize that being more honest and transparent about their vulnerabilities or their challenges is actually a good thing to do. And I mean, your case is a really great example of that. And I would actually go as far as saying that most of the well-known personalities or thought leaders are those that choose to be very, very honest and prolific in sharing their stories. And many of those stories revolve around tough times and overcoming them, and not only talking about the good stuff. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree completely. I've had the opportunity over the past several decades to witness many different speakers who come from different backgrounds. And I know for me personally, and maybe it's just because of my journey, it's very hard for me to connect with somebody who doesn't share some of the challenges that they've overcome. And that's true when it comes to business too. I resonate more with the person who's talking to me about the failures they had in business and what they learned from those failures than somebody who seems to be a wonder kid or has the golden touch, because I'm not the wonder kid and I don't have the golden touch. So how am I going to follow their path? How am I going to model what it is that they've done when I know that I have in the past made mistakes and I'm probably going to make them in the future? But if you tell me, hey, look, you know what? I started a business and I went bankrupt. And then I had to pick myself up. I had to brush myself off. I learned that I made mistakes on not doing things contractually the way that I needed to do them. I learned that I didn't get patents. And you're sharing with me how your success came from those bumps and bruises. I connect with you more. I'm more willing to go, okay, this is the average Joe who made his mistakes and succeeded versus somebody that just has the movie screen ending written for them. I want to connect with you and know that you really understand what it's like to walk this path and to walk up and, or excuse me, not to walk up, but wake up and face fears that every one of us has to face, or overcome these limiting belief systems that you may have that prevent you from moving forward. What did you do to overcome that belief that you don't know enough, or that you're not as good of a leader as you need to be? How did you overcome those things? That's what I want to know.
Definitely. I mean, as consultants, this is very much a relationship-based business. And people want to buy, they want to interact with people who they feel close to, they trust. And there's no better way than having someone trust you than to be very open and honest with them. And ultimately, sharing these true, transparent messages create messaging that people can resonate with, where if you're just talking a bunch of hype and kind of marketing jibber jabber, it doesn't resonate with most real buyers, because real buyers want a real connection. So this makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting because I've been having this conversation with clients as well as with other colleagues recently, just about the importance of transparency in marketing and exposing and even embracing and sharing vulnerabilities. And what you're providing here in terms of your story, Willard, is really a great example. So let's switch for a little bit, because I want to take us to where you are right now, and then we can kind of work our way backwards a little bit and figure out how you got to where you are. You've helped now many, from my understanding, multi-million-dollar companies grow. They've added employees, they've increased their revenue significantly, and you have a process for doing that. Tell us, first of all, what is that process called?
Well, there are two processes that we use. One is the 7 stages methodology. There are 7 stages that a business goes through, whether it is a dog walking business or a multinational company. They all go through those same 7 phases. And then the other is what I wrote the book about, which is what I call the anatomy of transformation. And that is, again, another system, another process that you use within the business with each person who's involved or with each department that's involved. Right. And it's unique in the fact that the framework overlays any area that you're looking to transform. You just plug in other strategies. But it's a combination of those two things that have allowed us to get great results with the people that we work with.
Okay. And so for consultants that are listening to this who are either an independent, and solo consultant or the owner of a small consulting firm, which of these processes would most benefit them?
Great question. With the 7 stages, that's really helping you identify where your client is struggling at right now. Stage 1 is what we call the strategic planning stage. Now, again, the company could be in business for 18 years, but they still have not really worked out the strategic plan of where they're going. They may not be clear on their business identity. They may not be clear on their ideal client. They may not be clear on all those things.
Sure.
Stage 2 is the specialty stage. Where do you really become the industry leader or the person that people think of when they're looking for your product or service? Stage 3 is the synergy stage, where you actually are now having to work with other people. And again, these, depending on where you're coming in to work with a company at, they may be in any one of these phases or be performing at anywhere from 30 to 80% in any one of these different stages. Stage 4 is the system stage, where a business will never become scalable until you've got systems, procedures, policies in place that allow the business to operate without you being hands-on in everything. And most businesses fail between stage 3 and stage 4. They'll get a bunch of the people in, but they won't have the processes or the systems in place to allow those people to thrive. Stage 5 is where the business actually becomes its own entity. It becomes something that operates better when the business owner is not there. And it's not because, the business owner is a liability, but it's because you've really paid attention to making sure you have the right people in the right places and that the right processes and systems are in place for them to excel at doing their job. Stage 6 is where you've now become an entity that is investable. You can either get VCs to invest, or you can turn it into a franchise. You can take it public, because the system has proven that it runs without you having to be involved. And then stage 7 is where it's about turning it into a legacy, where the business will continue long after you retire, after you step away, and can be handed down through the family or turned over to a trust.
Just a quick question then for you on this. This is obviously a very well thought out 7-stage approach that you use when you go into work with client organizations.
Yep.
Did you always have this 7-stage process, or is this something that you developed a certain number of years into your practice as a consultant?
This is actually a methodology that came from one of my partners that I work with as a consultant. His name's Carl Gould. He wrote the book that's called The 7 Stages of Small Business Success. So it's a methodology I wish I could take credit for, but it's what Carl did. And yeah, we use it with every business that we come into. We actually do an analysis with the companies when we come in to identify where are they in each of these phases. Have they reached maturity in some of these phases? Like I said, I've come in and sat down with businesses that have been in business for 15, 20 years, and their stage 1 and stage 2 are still that of an infant. Mm-hmm. They haven't really laid out, what is my exit strategy? What is my plan for building this company? How am I going to scale it? How am I going to grow it? And they haven't really identified what makes them different from the competition when it comes to their product or service. How can they become the person or the product that's thought of when somebody's looking for that specific solution? But
perfect, yeah.
The 7 stages we apply with every business that we work with.
No, that's really great. And I guess what I'm wondering here, because I'm thinking about some of the consultants who will be listening to this, and there will be some who may not yet have a very well-developed process of how they really take a client through an engagement. Just talk to us a little bit about the difference between when you were consulting and didn't have this 7-stage process, and then how did things change when you started to apply and really implement and take clients through a very specific process? What happened? What shifted in your business?
Sure. Everything shifted in my business when this happened. One of my mentors, when I was actually working on my latest book, The Anatomy of Transformation, he asked me a question, and I'll ask the same thing to your listeners, and I will also pre-frame that it's a loaded question because I didn't know the answer, and I'm not sure many people who would. He asked me, what was the difference between Napoleon Hill, who we all know now because of Think and Grow Rich and the Laws of Success and Outwitting the Devil, but during his lifetime, he actually failed in many areas. He actually ended up destitute at the end of his life, where he was living in a family's basement in West Virginia after having studied the most successful people in his era. What was the difference between Napoleon Hill and W. Clement Stone, who built an empire teaching the same skills that Napoleon Hill talked about?
Great question. Yeah, what's the answer?
The answer was, and this is what my mentor told me, and it made sense of why my business shifted also, was Napoleon Hill was selling concepts. W. Clement Stone was selling systems. People will invest in systems, especially when they're a business and they're looking at you as a consultant. Yes, they want your expertise, but they also want to know that there is a proven system, there's a formula, there is a path that you're going to follow to get them from where they are to where they want to be. If you're just coming in and they're talking to you about concepts, the probability that they're actually going to write you that check to hire you is dramatically reduced. So when you ask what the shift was for me, look, I'm a very intelligent person. I've learned a lot from my journey, my mistakes, my successes. I can come in and I can sit down and I can have a conversation with pretty much anybody and we can find solutions. But if I'm just flying by the seat of my pants, they're just having a conversation with somebody. But if I come in and I say, look, we have a proven methodology that we've used with these companies that have gotten them to go from here to here, or we have a system that we follow and I'm going to walk you through that process, they gain so much more certainty that you're not just leading them down a path where you don't know where they're going. When you have a methodology that you can follow, when you have a system that you can hang your hat on, it just makes doing business so much easier.
100%. This is such a great point for everyone to really think about and embrace. I can't agree more because it's so true, right? You know, sharing just ideas and even talking about, to some degree, a process. I had this conversation with a client the other day. They said when they're in with a client and they're talking to their clients about a process, the client kind of gets it, but they're still not really sure of it. But when they start talking about a program, right, more of a system, more of a package, all of a sudden there's a lot more buy-in from the client. So this is really, really important. And I would just encourage everyone listening to this or reading the transcript to think about your own current service offerings and products and how you engage with clients. And if you haven't yet well-defined your offerings, this would be a really great opportunity to work on that or to get some assistance with it, because having it can certainly make a very big difference, not only to your business, as Willard is sharing with us, but it can also really help you to do a better job of delivering your expertise to clients. Because when you have that real program in place and you're doing the same things over and over and over again for clients, you get better and better and better at it, which then helps you to achieve better results for clients. And I'm sure you've probably seen the same thing in your own work, right, Willard? While we work with a lot of seasoned and experienced consultants here at Consulting Success, I'm often contacted by new early stage consultants. Invariably, the question I'm asked is, what are the steps I should take to become a successful consultant and grow my consulting business to my first 6 figures per year? Well, I'm excited to announce that we've opened the doors for our Momentum program. This is our most popular program for early stage consultants, and it has helped almost 1,000 consultants to start, run, and grow successful consulting businesses. It gives you the step-by-step plan to help you with your messaging, your fees, and pricing strategies, how to win more proposals, how to go to market more effectively, developing a marketing system to generate leads consistently, and so much more. And right now, until September the 19th, you can sign up for Momentum and get 50% off the regular price by going to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. Only 100 spots are available to join Momentum and get 50% off. This deal is only available until September the 19th or until all 100 spots are gone. We won't be opening up new spots in this program for several months, so don't wait. Go to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. Again, it gives them more certainty, and it also gives me a roadmap to follow when I'm working with them.
Definitely.
You and I had spoken a little bit before we started the interview, and you had mentioned that a lot of the listeners are either transitioning from corporate into becoming consultants, or they're just starting their business as consultants. And I have to tell you, some of the mistakes that I made early on really came from not recognizing how to even sell my consulting services. When I'm just talking about concepts, again, I'm having great conversations with business owners. I'm having great conversations with potential clients, but I'm also giving them enough information that they feel they don't need me.
Mm-hmm.
There's that challenge, I think many people, when they're coming out of having worked for someone else and now getting ready to start their own consulting business, they have to recognize that, especially in this business, what we're sharing many times is intangible ideas. You have to learn that there's a very fine line between telling them what and selling them how. And when you have a program, a system, a methodology, it makes it much easier for you to be able to tell them what they need to do, tell them what the benefits are going to be of working with you, and then they're going to say, great, how do we do that? You say, well, I actually have a very specific process that we follow, and we can talk about what that engagement would look like. Because otherwise, in the past, I would just sit there and I would, excuse the language, but I would verbally vomit on the person that I'm talking to, just sharing all these great ideas and all these great concepts to the point where I would overwhelm them. And then when it would come time to ask them for doing business, like, no, I think I'm pretty good. I can go with what you've told me right now. Yeah. And I talked myself out of business.
Definitely. It's almost like people who go in or consultants going in and giving essentially a presentation to a buyer instead of acting more like a doctor and really trying to diagnose, right? It's people often go in and just try and prescribe without really doing the diagnosis first. And yet the diagnosis and asking all the really good, important, meaningful questions is where you learn how to identify the value that the buyer cares most about, and then figure out how to position your offering in a way that really resonates with them. So here, as I mentioned to you, Willard, before we jumped into kind of the formal interview and got it started and hit record, that there are really two groups of people that make the majority of our listeners. The first group are those who have been running consulting businesses for quite some time and want to get to the next level. And there's also those who are transitioning from a corporate career, have deep expertise and subject matter domain knowledge, but haven't yet really grown their consulting business. And so they're working on it. So for both of those groups, let's just kind of transition to talking about marketing for a minute. For you as a business consultant, what is your approach right now? Because your business is obviously, you've been doing it for 20 years. It's much more developed. What are you doing right now to get more clients? What's working best for you for attracting clients? And then if we could just kind of contrast that, if there is any contrast to maybe what you were doing when you first got started.
Well, my funnel generation mainly right now is speaking. When I get up and I'm sharing in front of an audience, and again, I make sure that the audience I'm speaking in front of is my ideal client.
Right, so important,
I've done a lot of thought and development into, first off, what's my business identity? What do I do at my core? What differentiates me from the competition? And what are the benefits for someone who works with me? So I know those pieces so I'm able to express it to somebody. And then making sure that I'm in front of my ideal client. Then what I'll do is I'll get out and I'll do speaking presentations. Doesn't matter if it's in front of a meetup group or whether it's in front of a professional association. Mm-hmm. My experience that has worked best for me is that business comes for me from face-to-face interactions where people get to see me present, interact with me, ask questions, have that face-to-face conversation afterwards, and then follow up and move to the complementary strategy session. That's part of my process also, is after they see me speak, I offer a complimentary session where I spend just about an hour with them on the phone and doing exactly what you said, taking the doctor approach. The 40 minutes of that phone call is just me asking them questions about 8 areas of their business, identifying what the challenges are, where are they now versus where they want to be, and what it's costing them in either lost potential revenue or what it's costing them in expenses that are being incurred from them not being where they want to be, and just really being able to quantify and make it tangible of what the financial cost is for them not to be doing what they know that they need to be doing. And then from there, moving into what's called a discovery day, which is a more in-depth analysis, but that is actually a paid service where we look at 55 areas of the business and then moving into execution of the plan.
Great. So how many, if we could kind of work through your funnel a little bit together here, I think it'll be very valuable for people to kind of get some insight into this. How many speaking engagements do you typically do per year or per month?
I actually had some health issues come up in Q4 of last year, so I've taken some time off the road. Normally, I'm doing 2 to 3 engagements per month.
Okay.
And my goal for 2018 is actually to get up, with the release of the book, to get up to 6 to 8 engagements.
Wow. Okay. And have you found that like the 2 to 3 or 4 or so per month, doing that, and when you do it properly, it's typically enough to fill your funnel with enough leads and opportunities?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wonderful. And then, okay, so then you get them into kind of this strategy call, which is a free hour-long or so kind of consultation assessment. From there, if they want to enroll and get started with you, then they go into this discovery day, which is the full day. What's the range of pricing for a discovery day typically?
That really depends on the size of the company.
Okay.
If they're a $500,000 to a $5 million company, discovery day actually ends up being 2 days. Sorry if I said it was a day, but it's actually 2 days.
Okay.
Smaller company, it can be $10,000 for that process. Then if you're looking at a $5 million company to a $20 million company, it can be $20,000 for those 2 days. And then from that 20 million up to 50, it might be as much as 35,000 for those 2 days.
Got it. And then from there, then you're moving on to more of a full engagement where it sounds like you'd be helping them to implement more of the information, kind of the strategies, the tactics that you'd be working through during those couple of discovery days.
Yeah. So the discovery day, with it being broken down in 2 parts, number one really is the discovery. We actually have the owner and his top advisors or his key performers fill out some information that allow us to assess what's going on in the 55 areas of the business. And on day one, we're actually breaking that data down and going, okay, based on what you've told us, here's what we see is happening. Tell us why that's happening.
Right.
I've seen some consultants who come in and it's tell. What I would rather do is, and what's worked for us is we come in and say, okay, this is what you told us is happening in your company. Give me more information. Because I think many business owners are resistant to the consultant coming in being the know-it-all. But if I come in and I actually help them describe, discover, and communicate about what their problems are, they're going to come up with a lot of the solutions on their own. So on day one, we're identifying what the challenges are, what the solutions are. Day two, we start working on the strategic plan that they'll be able to implement over the next 3 years to be able to solve some of those problems. Now, at the end of day two, they've got a 3-year strategic plan that they're able to take and implement and execute on their own if they like.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, and this is part of our sales process, we know that the majority of business owners know what they should be doing. They're just not doing what they know they should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So when we've helped them lay out the plan, normally their question is, okay, what's next? What's the next step to executing this? Because I'm so caught up in the day-to-day operations of my business, you give me a lot of great next steps for me to take, and I don't know where and how I'm going to implement these things. So that discovery day gives them so much value in identifying what the challenges are, identifying what the solutions are, and laying out the plan that you've, again, built that trust that they're going to say, I need you to help me execute this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if they were able to accomplish it by themselves, they probably already would have. And I think this is also goes back to kind of touches on maybe a concern that a lot of consultants have about kind of giving away too much information, even when it's just in your initial sales process. But always keep in mind that most real buyers who will actually be prepared to invest with you, they're the kinds of people that know that they're not going to accomplish everything themselves, or they would have already gotten there. And so you should never be too concerned about providing too much value or sharing, because the people that would just take your information and run with it would probably likely never engage with you anyways, or make any kind of real investment. And I just want to thank you, Willard, for sharing your process here with us and how you engage with people. What does this compare like to when you were earlier on in your building your consulting business in those early days? Right now it's speaking that's working very well for you. Were you speaking also at that time, or were you doing something different?
I was doing speaking back then also. I also was relying and counting a lot on personal referrals when I first started.
Mm-hmm.
And I do suggest that to people who are starting their business is you really need to look to the relationships that you currently have, the people who know your skill set, the people who trust you, and get them to make the introductions. The thing that made it that I was struggling so much early on was I wasn't clear on who my ideal client was.
Mm-hmm.
I thought everybody could use what I was teaching. Everybody
Right.
could use things. And what I learned the hard way was that when you're marketing to everybody, you're selling to nobody. You have to recognize your ideal client so well that you know what keeps them up at night, you know, what they get in fights with their spouse about. You know what their biggest challenges and their biggest opportunities are. Because even though it's a business that's hiring you to do the work, the person that makes the decision is a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And they have pains that they're trying to get rid of or problems that they're trying to solve. And what gets them to write the check is when they know you understand that pain, you understand those problems, and you have a solution for them that's going to get them out of that pain and get rid of those problems.
So Willard, let me ask you, because I think a lot of consultants will be resonating with what you're saying right now. Honing in on that ideal client and really focusing on them is probably one of the most challenging decisions that any consultant needs to make, simply for the fact that it's a choice of kind of a process of elimination. You have to say no to a lot of things so that you can get very clear on what to say yes to. Mm-hmm. But oftentimes what consultants find is they say, okay, I've narrowed in on my ideal client. I know that they are, let's say, manufacturers in this specific geographic area. They have this number of employees. They're this kind of size in terms of revenue. And I know that my ideal client within these kinds of organizations is the VP of operations. But when it comes down to honing in on their messaging to really figure out what is it that VP of operations cares most about, oftentimes people don't know right away what that is. It might be 5 or 10 different things. Or what would, from your experience, what would you say that people should do to hone in and really figure out like what is going to be the most effective messaging so that their message, their marketing will get the attention and interest and really resonate with their ideal client?
There's a very detailed process that I take people through in doing this. I don't know that we'll have enough time to go into it on this interview, but I will give you some of the key points of it. Trust me, I get pushback all the time when I bring this up to a client or a potential consultant. But first you identify the B2B aspects of it as you did. What industry are they in? What size is their company? What's the revenue? What are they local, regional, national, global, as far as their company? And now that you've identified, okay, it's a VP in a certain area, it's the VP of marketing that you're talking to, or it's the VP of sales, whatever area. Now comes the second part, and this is where people always want to argue with me. In this area, there is a list of 12 to 15 questions that I start zeroing in and asking people. And again, I get the weirdest looks when I do this, but I tell people you need to be very, very specific on this person. Is it a man or a woman? And they'll go, it's both. It's like, not allowed to be both. Is it a man or a woman?
Mm-hmm.
How old are they? Well, they're between 35 and 55. Great age range, but I need a specific age. How old are they? And they keep pushing back. And I give them a couple of filters to run it through. I mean, if they have had experience before in business and doing these business, I say, I want you to think of these 3 things. Number 1, who has been your most profitable client? Number 2, who got it? Who knew the benefits and why they needed to hire you without you having to explain it, without you having to twist their arm? They just got it. And number 3, who is the easiest and most fun to deal with? And when you start running it through these filters, if you've been doing this for a while, you start seeing a pattern that, well, it's a female and they've been 42 years old and they've been married and they have 2 kids and they live in the suburbs. And people go, why in the world? We're talking about business consulting. Why would you worry about all these things? And I'll give you a very specific reason. Because a 42-year-old woman who's married with 2 kids who lives in the suburbs will have totally different things that are keeping her up at night or that are affecting the way she does business than a 55-year-old man who's divorced with 2 kids, because his 2 kids will actually be out of school and all these things, so he doesn't have to deal with all the things that he does of a parent whose children are in activities in school. You start to get to know this person so well and what's going on in their life, where to connect with them, when to connect with them, and what to communicate with them about. But most people aren't willing to put that level of effort into identifying who their ideal client is, because going, well, I wouldn't only do business with a 42-year-old woman. And my answer is, I'm not telling you you will only do business with them, but this is your ideal client. You'll do business with anybody who comes, but these are the ones that just you love to work with. They're profitable, and they're the ones that you now know where to target your messaging to, because you're going to communicate directly with them.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a reason why most people don't make it to the Olympics, right? Some people are willing to put in more work, to be more committed, and to go through things in a much kind of finer and more detailed approach. I couldn't agree more with what you just said there. I think that's really, really important. A lot of great nuggets and ideas for everyone listening to this or reading this in the transcript afterwards to think about, and would highly encourage you to give thought to your own process, to how you're approaching your own ideal clients, because you've probably seen or you've heard, if you've been on some of these podcasts and you've been coming back to the show, that this is not the first time that an experienced consultant like Willard is sharing this message, right? The importance, and I'm not saying it's easy to do, but it's highly, highly important, right? Of focusing in on your ideal client and getting very, very clear on who they are. It's very challenging for a lot of people, but it's one of the best steps that you can take, because not only will your life become a lot easier, not only will your business really benefit and start to grow in terms of more sales and more clients, right? But you'll also be able to focus your energy on the right kinds of people, and stop focusing and spending energy on those that really aren't ideal to do business with you. So Willard, there's so much more that I know that we could go into here today. We only have a little bit of time. I want to make sure that people can connect with you, can learn more about your work and your book and just everything that you have going on. So I want to thank you for coming on, but where can people go to learn more about you and your work?
I appreciate that. Thank you. First, they can go to my website, which is willardbarth.com. That's WILLARD as in David, B as in boy, ARTH. And if they're interested in the book, I actually have a special offer going on that I'll send you the book for free. All you have to do is cover the cost of shipping and handling. And along with getting a physical copy of the book, you'll also get the ebook version. And you can get that by going to TAOTbook.com. That's the abbreviation for the Anatomy of Transformation book. So TAOTbook.com. And again, I'll send you the book. Just cover the cost of shipping and handling.
Very cool. Sounds good. We'll have all those details in the show notes as well, all linked up. So be sure to check the show notes for all of those details and everything else that you may have missed, because we covered a lot here. Again, Willard, thank you so much for sharing your story and some of your experiences and kind of taking us along your journey here.
It's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, Michael.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.